Teachers of Reddit, what are your stories of, oh god, this child is a sociopath? This one happened just the other day and, obviously, I'm going to be anonymous about it to protect the child's identity. Let's call her Abby. So, I'm driving a minibus of students home from a basketball practice when suddenly Abby starts screaming. Did that have peanuts in it? I'm allergic to peanuts. She begins hyperventilating and crying and actually makes me pull over so she can get off the bus and throw up. We're about 15 minutes from the school and I'm literally having a panic attack. So, I call the principal and ask what should I do? Do we have an EpiPen on hand at the school? She seems confused and puts Abby's grandmother on, who tells me she wasn't aware her granddaughter, who is claiming she can barely breathe, had any allergies. When we got back to the school I was about ready to faint and the principal brings out her registration paperwork to show me. No listed allergies. She isn't allergic to anything. It was all an act. The hyperventilating, the crying, even the throwing up, was all for attention. I taught a 15-year-old boy who was really creepy. He submitted a creative writing story that was debauchery fiction in which he graphically described how a white, blonde woman was being violated to corrupt the purity she feigns, which was quite scary as a white, blonde woman to read. When confronted by a vice principal, he started ranting about how he hated all the girls in the class because they were all B, even though none listed had ever had an interaction with him, positive or negative. He then wrote me an apology letter where heaps of the lines were aggressively crossed out with, drawn next to them. At last confrontation by a vice principal, he got really aggressive, walked out and punched the school fence several times. Unfortunately he wasn't expelled. The insults are getting younger and younger. For what it's worth, I am actually a teacher but I was babysitting in this case. I was asked to babysit a 9-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy a few weekends ago. I'd never met the kids, but I figured the 9-year-old and I will just hang out with the mutual understanding that she doesn't need me there, and the 3-year-old might need some redirection and to just be kept occupied. Boy was I freaking wrong. The 9-year-old was a straight up manipulative bully. She gave the boy jobs to do when playing Play-Doh and then tore him up telling him how bad he was at every job she gave him. She chased him around the house with a sharpened pencil. She roughhoused with him until he got hurt and ran upstairs crying. And then she chased after him laughing going AWW I'm really sorry. She stole the TV remote out of my hand and hid it when I tried to find a movie to put on. She tried to tell me that his bedtime wasn't actually when the kid's mom told me it was and got him up to play trucks. Then when I was finally getting him to go to sleep with a story, she came in the room and told me that it was way past his bedtime and he's not allowed any more books. I'd never met a child so starved for control. But I really question where this is coming from because 1. I gave her nothing to push back against. If she was being controlling because I was treating her like a child, I would have understood. But I wasn't. And 2. It was clear her parents weren't extremely strict with her on a normal basis. Anyway, my first clue should have been when the parents offered me a higher pay per hour than I asked for. Even with the chance to make $100 in one night, I'm never going back. Poor little boy. A first grader, Madison, made up name is made up, pushed a friend off of a high stool in the art room because the other girl wouldn't share her crayon. Immediately give up the crayon even though she was in the middle of using it. The friend wasn't badly hurt, but said she didn't want to sit with Madison anymore. So I said okay and moved her. Madison burst into tears and told me that I had to force the other girl to sit with her. That it wasn't fair that I told the other girl that she didn't have to share. That it wasn't fair that I told the other girl that she didn't have to be friends with Madison if Madison was hurting her and making her feel bad. And how unfair it was that the other girl had fallen off the stool just to make Madison look bad. I just can't even with Madison. Literally nothing is ever her fault. If she steals something, it's the other student's fault for giving it to her then lying about doing so. I've seen kids actually doubt themselves about whether they've given Madison their things, even though I watched her steal it. This girl is 6 and has gaslighting down to a science. I have an ex who is a preschool teacher and he affectionately calls his students my little sociopaths. Not to their faces or parents, because that age is just. Empathy is a learned skill. Let's put it that way. I had honestly never thought about it, but he taught me that things like hitting is bad because it hurts people, and hurting people is not a good thing is something that kids have to be taught. Wanted to clarify that while kids have a huge range of emotions that we sometimes forget about because they can't use their words for them the way adults do, the behaviors one uses to demonstrate concepts like caring for others are a skill of sorts to be demonstrated, taught, and practiced, and it's much harder to get them to understand it when they are older than, like, 4 or 5. I think he said 3 is really when they start to get it, but often parents are still treating 3-year-olds like babies. My mom was a teacher for several decades and she taught some real winners. 2. There's a kid a few years younger than me that she had and she never explicitly said anything bad about him because he was the son of one of her friends and lives in their neighborhood. But that kid was straight from a frickin' horror movie. He's adopted and one of the first things he did after his parents brought him home was to shut the family dog in the refrigerator. One time he sneaked up to my parents' house in the middle of the night. We live in the middle of nowhere, so this is terrifying in and of itself, and tried to break into our house. My parents usually left the doors unlocked at night and I would go around after they went to bed and lock them. When that didn't work, he cut the electrical wiring to our outside lights, so it was pitch black outside and we couldn't see anything, and then slashed the tires on my car and tried to break the windows. He used to just beat the crap out of other kids, especially younger ones, whenever the mood struck him. That sucker is like 30 now and he's still a total piece of crap. Like, he still lives with his mom and he's gotten her house swatted at least 5 times because he deliberately goes online into spaces where that's a thing and antagonizes people, then takes off to leave her to deal with the fallout. I'm hoping to be an adoptive parent myself one day and sometimes I have nightmares about this kid because as far as I know, his parents really did try super hard to help but it just never worked. Had a kid that is basically Charles Manson. Has been aggressive before, stabbing kindergarteners with scissors, hitting, biting, scratching. First grade began new behaviors. He would convince other kids to eat crayons, or to go tell other kids to say hurtful things to others. This was also the year he became more controlling over girls. He would invite them to play, then if they didn't do what he said he would get the group to push the girl out. The result was the girls really wanted his attention. When the girls realized it wasn't worth it and began abandoning him he became aggressive again. This year, 2nd grade, he has begun trying to find like-minded kids and create a gang of bullies. Of course the staff are trying our best to curtail the behaviors, but the parents are very litigious. Multiple school psychologists and social workers have recommended individual therapy in social minutes, but the parents insisted it wasn't needed. They said that we were lying about the behaviors and wanted their own social services person to come in for observation. So obviously the student was on his best behavior. He is not stupid by any means. He knew what was up. The parents then used those findings to stonewall us for 6 more months. I do not believe any child beyond saving. But there are kids that really cannot be saved by public schools. This kid needs more social psych minutes, smaller classes, and more adult attention. We just don't have the money to provide that, especially when parents want to fight us every step tooth and nail. Yeah, kids can be scary sometimes and the scariest part is when you realize their parents aren't just going to defend them, but actually sabotage you. I taught a 4-year-old boy who actually scared me because I fear what his future will be. I can see him ended up doing some awful things to people. He would try and kiss and hug girls and when they didn't want to, he'd hold them tightly and try to anyway, even if they loudly protested. I explained that there is no kissing in school and if someone doesn't want a hug, they absolutely do not have to. I also said that some people don't like hugging. He said well I want her to. So she will. He just couldn't understand boundaries of any kind. This is just one tiny example of the things he did. I did refer him as I believe he has autism and he's undergoing assessment now and awaiting a diagnosis but I worry there's something else there with him. He would also watch other children to see how he should act. For example, a child might be sad and another child comforts them. He would copy this behavior but totally exaggerates it, like completely over the top and use it as an excuse to touch others, mainly girls. He never showed any emotion other than anger and jealousy. He had a very scary look in his eyes and I've never met another child like him. I worked in a daycare and had a child like that. It was only after he, 5 years old, took his dog out and laid it on the table that one of the workers called CPS suspecting that he was being physically shamed at home. It was only after someone mentioned it that some of his past behavior started clicking. Not a teacher, sorry, but when I was younger, maybe 8, I remember going to some family gathering way out in the country. There were tons of distant relatives there. Great grandparents had 11 kids, and therefore lots of cousins I didn't know. One girl, probably 4 or 5, was scary. All of us kids would try to play with her and she would just act strange. But one thing I really remember was someone was showing us some baby chicks, letting us hold them and pet them. My mother had just explained to us, be very gentle, fear babies, etc etc. Well, this little girl is holding a baby chick on her palm, looks right into my mom's eyes and just squeezes this chick until its eyes bulge. They stopped her and to my knowledge the chick was fine, but I'll never forget the look in her eyes. Immediately after this happened, her dad scooped her up in his arms and she just looked back at all of us, smiling maniacally. Not me, but my mum is a teacher. She has plenty of these stories, but the one thing that sticks out to me is the one time she reprimanded her 8-year-old girl for being aggressive to the other children. Nothing too serious, just name. Please let go of other child, you're hurting him and he doesn't like it. The girl turned to my mum, looked her up and down and said, I'm going to make sure you lose your job. You'll never teach again. My mum said that the threat didn't scare her, because my mum had done nothing wrong. But the way the child said it shook her to her core. Birth of a Karen. Not a teacher, but I only remember the story because I had witnessed the fallout. In 11th grade, there was a girl, let's call her Carol, who was crazy about the cartoon Sonic the Hedgehog, to the point where a teacher threatened to fail her on a writing assignment if she turned in yet another Sonic fanfiction. Instead of actually doing work properly, she handed in an angry letter to the teacher as her assignment. Can't remember what the specifics of that letter were, but I do remember it was such that she got suspended for the remainder of the year. When she came back in grade 12, she had to apologize to everyone in her homeroom for her actions the previous year. It's in this apology that she tells us she had a brain tumor the size of Quebec. The kid from Quebec, naturally, yells at her for comparing Quebec to a brain tumor. Carol did a lot of other stuff besides the angry letter that year. She mentioned in her apology that she got a girl in trouble for vandalism so she, Carol, could get the lead role in a school play. She dressed up as a Grim Reaper for some old person's funeral and accused my friend, whom she never had any prior connection to, of tricking her into thinking the funeral was a Halloween party. Since this happened in May, the excuse was made of toothpicks. She got a 0 on a term project for math because she accidentally submitted a poorly written and creepy Sonic fanfiction instead of her assignment. She threw a temper tantrum to get the teacher to change the due date. Nothing came of it, and that's just the stuff she admitted to. The kid from Quebec, naturally, yells at her for comparing Quebec to a brain tumor. I bet the kid did it in French too. Had a student who wasn't the best behaved, but hadn't caused a ton of problems yet. A rumor started going around school that he had killed the neighbor's dog. I don't remember why, but obviously concerning. Another student said to him, hey, they say you killed your neighbor's dog. Did you really do that, or something to that effect? And this kid immediately said it didn't die. Nothing else. No emotion or explanation. That was probably just to get the kids off of his back. If I know high schoolers, they will savagely bother you about anything, and going along with it is the best way to solve the problem. He did that, but also made it seem like they shouldn't mess with him. So I have this kid, moved from another country 2 years ago and I got him this year. Was warned that he was difficult. We hit it off quite well. He is difficult and loud, but manageable. Out of a sudden he wants to talk to me alone, and starts crying the moment we are alone. He starts to tell me his life story, from being neglected by his stepfather, who is abusive towards him, and that social services were already involved, so they moved and so on. But he didn't want me to do anything in case it got worse. I got in touch with the psych team and my boss, and we were discussing how to move forward. We decided to talk to the parents first to get a feel for the situation, so I invited them for a talk, and holy crap, the mother was nearly burned out. The stepdad started crying because apparently their son was tyrannical and making their lives a living heck. I was not expecting this. I was providing in-class support for a 6-year-old student who had very concerning behavior. Let's call her Jamie. I was lucky in that Jamie liked me. This did not stop her from kicking, scratching, and biting me whenever I would attempt to stop her. Jamie's teacher and I were working together to collect data for the school's diagnostician. But one thing we could never even begin to understand is what was triggering her negative behaviors. When she wanted to be, she was a very sweet kid. I knew that she could make good grades if she cooperated and worked on her assignments. But randomly throughout the day she would go on a literal rampage in the classroom, throwing things, flipping tables, attacking students, shouting and cursing. Once she even darted out of the classroom, out the side door of the school, and towards the main road. She would play with her friends at recess and then an hour later I'd have to pull her off of those same kids while she swung her legs and fists at them. I remember one day I had taken her out of the classroom until she calmed down. I said, "Jamie, I just want to help you. I want you to feel better so you can go play with your friends. I'm not mad at you. I just want to help. What would make you feel better?" And she stared at me with a blank expression. I actually acted like this as a child. I got better as I grew up, but it turns out I'm bipolar. Not everything is psychopathic. Principal took me outside the class for a while to talk about something. The minute I came back everyone was silent and one kid was standing at the board, marker in one hand and razor blades in the other, one jammed into the marker cap. No idea why he would do that apart from holy crap. He wants to see me cut my hand off. Suspended if I recall correctly. Yearly project for 10th-11th grade. The kids had to assign themselves into groups of 4. They all ended up in their groups apart from one kid who remained, the stereotypical loner kid at the back. I asked him if he wanted to join any group he saw or make a project of his own, and he just looked into my eyes and said, "I don't care. They'll all soon be dead anyway." I had to take him to the principal and he simply said I didn't mean it as a threat. I just relish in the fact that one day each and every one of them will be actually dead. Holy crap. I still remember this to this day. It's been like 7 years. TBH, I can totally see him saying this to comfort himself, trying to get perspective on how long high school will last, after being stuck alone yet again when the teacher told the kids to self-assemble into groups. It's been over 20 years and I still remember the horror of hearing the teacher tell us to find our own groups, with me knowing I'll inevitably be singled out at the end and humiliated. I currently have a student in my special ed academic support class who is just so manipulative. My colleague and I, mostly, joked how he's probably drowned a cat just to watch it die or something, just a serial killer-esque. He's habitually true and so most of the time, he's not a problem, but he really knows how to manipulate everyone around him. He's not smart enough to manipulate adults effectively, yet, but he can get the other students going. He instigates things with students who are much less intelligent than he is and then plays the victim. He gets away with it because the other students aren't cognitively able to give their side of the story. He lies constantly about banal things, like he went around saying that a knockoff LV bag that he got at a charity shop was worth $3,000 and threw a fit when I wouldn't let him take it to the bathroom with him and accused me of wanting to steal it. The next day, he admitted he knew it was fake. The one day that he's been here in the last month, he accused another one of my students of buying drugs. It turns out that the cognitively disabled boy that the little sociopath manipulates did, in fact, steal marijuana from his mother and put it into this girl's bag in the morning. She found it there and didn't know what to do with it, so she left it. This little bastard came up to me and told me about this nefarious drug deal that happened in the morning, and this girl had her things searched and ended up suspended and her parents grounded her for 6 months. She is miserable coming into school every day. He hasn't been back to see the damage, but I'm sure that he'll be excited when he sees that he's spread misery. I am so happy every day his name appears on the absence list. This child will appear out of nowhere, drop a bomb on the classroom and then disappear for weeks. It's almost insidious. I teach dance and had a 6-year-old I'll never forget. For the record, all 6-year-olds are terrible. Developmentally they're all starting to flex their egos and it can be a mess of personalities. but here's a collection of things that occurred that made me realize this child was a sociopath. I'll call them A. Had a child fall asleep in the middle of class. Poor thing didn't get a nap that day and just flat out passed out in the middle of dancing. I picked her up and placed her on the side and she slept through class. Next week A spends the whole class pretending to fall asleep. The fact that they had remembered the previous week and knew to emulate the behavior is very odd for that age. Fake cries on a dime anytime I tried getting her to follow along with class. Absolute crocodile tears. Dry face. Isn't allowed to be the line leader cause they were as last week. Fake tears. Isn't allowed to guess the Disney song because another student already guessed it. Fake tears. Anytime they didn't get to be the special kid. Fake tears. Had them sit out once due to not following instructions. After giving a clear if you do X one more time you will sit out and then following through. Proceeds to start whining like a goddamn dog because she claims a student kept staring at them. Complete disruptive. Turns out one of my students is autistic and the fake crying and whining A was doing for attention was overstimulating them. Was a freaking feedback circle of these two triggering each other for a whole year. What really got me though was A came up to me and said they had a rash and need to sit out. This is after they spent 10 minutes suckling their arm to make it appear they had a rash. Told grandparent after class and they just they've been doing that. What? How does a 6-year-old have the wherewithal to plan out faking a rash like that? At the end of the year the mom gave me a gift card and a note that basically said thank you for putting up with my child. I got a new student in 5th grade who had already been diagnosed with so many things because you can't be a psychopath sociopath till you're an adult for the most part. Odd, her mom had schizophrenia. A whole long list of issues. Def not gonna get the diagnosis in 5th grade. But the stepmom came to the school to warn us about her. Y'all, she was my best student. She stole anything that wasn't nailed down. But my class was so crazy. We already had like 3 EBD diagnoses and the admin just threw the rest of the bad kids in for funsies. That I think she felt like she was with her people lol. She got great grades. She never made a peep. Weirdly wholesome. I go to an international school that had lots of different people in it. Kind of irrelevant to the story. Anyways, back in primary school there was this child, let's call him Roman. He was abusive to teachers and other students. In 1st grade he attacked the teacher and had the whole class in one half of the room whilst everyone watched in horror as he rained heck on the teacher's desk. He even peed on it. A couple of years later in 3rd grade he decides he wants to be a prick again. So he picks up a pencil and proceeded to stab 3 students around him and run to the teacher and stab him twice in the waist. Soon after he was expelled. Still wonder where that guy is. I am a student. Same age and year as Roman. Obligatory not a teacher statement. I had a friend in high school. He was in my physics class and we were in the same social groups. Who had a very aggressive personality. He used to make pipe bombs, played firecracker tag where you throw firecrackers at each other, and was an avid hunter. He used to joke about chasing cats down in his truck on the way to school and we all sort of brushed it off as trying to seem edgy. He also had these eyes that would go empty and cold when he was angry, which should have clued us all into what kind of person he was. We graduated and were in our early 20s when he officially snapped. He had an ex-girlfriend that he couldn't get over, and she was seeing a guy that buddy didn't like at all and found out they were heading to another city a few hours away with a group of friends. He hopped in his car with his rifles and shotgun and drove down the highway looking for them. He found them a short time later, crashed them into the ditch and executed all 4 of them before they had a chance to run. Afterwards he turned the gun on himself. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.